Hiko, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Daring Minds, the talk show that dares to ask questions that you don't mind us. I don't know, whatever. We're working on it, Gio. Every episode, it's going to get closer. Listen, it was better than nothing, which, let's be real, is what a lot of people's careers in Valorant are going to be when the 10 teams get locked in and if they don't qualify each time for those 2 slots. So, sorry, did I get too real? Right, back in the fancy world of Valorant. Yeah, Valorant, great game. It's, the future of esports. Everyone's involved in it. Steele's having a great time. Right, Steele, obviously people might know from some of the last episodes, we're sort of warming into on this show, not just like surface level topics. We want to dive into people's what's going on with their careers and whatnot. And in your case, I actually feel like the area we have to start goes like this. Right, I got the vibe when you were removed from 100 Thieves, in whatever context that was. I don't even think it was entirely, no, everyone really even knows the context of that. I got the vibe people couldn't tell. Were you sort of on the outs of Valorant? Like, were you going to be a streamer now and you we're done with the competitive side? Was it that, like, players in the org disagreed with your leadership style? Did the org not see you as the vision of the team, etc.? As usual, PR statements don't really give us any insight there. So can you give us some sense of, like, where were you at the end of this 100 Thieves period of time? Were you cool to keep going and re-up the roster? Obviously, that was the time when all the changes were starting. Where were you at that point in time, mate?
So, around the time that we qualified for the Masters 3 in Berlin, I was realizing that the team, just like the dynamic on the team wasn't going to work that well. There was just like too many different opinions just between everyone about like how the games run, how like practice is structured, like all these things. And I saw that it was just like, there was no, it just wasn't going to work out. It's like one of those things, like, like if you're dating someone, like this is a match or it's not a match. It wasn't a match. So I early on, let my GM know, like, hey, like after, champions at the end of the year, I'd like to, explore options to transfer to a different team, for example, because I can tell that just like the team isn't going to work out long term because of just personalities, about how we view the game, about, just like things happening behind the scenes, about like, secret like messages and stuff like that, just like people like alliances, so to speak. So like just between everything, it was just like, yeah, it's probably not going to work out with me. And I already can tell that, at least a couple of people on the team don't like me and I don't like them. And, it's not going to work out long term. And I think that word got out that I was trying, I wanted to leave the team, and they're like, well, let's get rid of him now. I think that's basically what ended up happening, yeah.
They just ripped the Band-Aid off immediately instead of sort of the slow transition, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know for sure, but that's what my take is from that.
Okay. Because the other thing I noticed is, to be fair, it's not like it was just your situation. Like, gradually after that, then, like, Hiko was exiting and people have now come, obviously, Nitro chose to leave the game. Right, I want to ask that then, because there's one thing I was a bit surprised by. The reason I didn't expect you were leaving the game entirely is I know you put in all those years in Counter-Strike to get a fucking chance at the top tier again and see what's possible. So what I want to ask is this then. The thing I find a bit weird about the angle you stay there is most of the teammates you had are people you know from CSGO. They're not the newer players, with the exception of Asuna. Like, aside from that, like, these are people that were around the scene the whole time you were around. Were you competing in CSGO? I mean, was there the vibe? Look, obviously, like I said, Hiko's being pushed out, Nitro's left the game, etc. Ethan isn't even on the bloody team anymore. Was there some vibe that group of people just didn't work, that dynamic somehow?
Well, when it came to those players, like I'd never actually like really talked to them all that much. Like Hiko, I never spoke to before 100 Thieves, and same thing with Nitro. Like outside of like a few Steam messages over like a course of a year, I never really like hung out with him, socialized with him. Like I was rarely at the same types of events as him. So there wasn't a lot of like overlap there even. It was like, yeah, I'm more familiar with them because they came from CS, but at the same time, like I'm just as familiar with like any like random tier 2 MDL player from CS. More so even because, I'd play with them on a daily basis and things like FPL, for example.
By the way, no, it's all good. By the way, that point that you said earlier, where you alluded to it, right? That is, by the way, one of the number one complaints I've heard about NA esports from your dot mate, which goes like this. in every team, there is always cliques that form. And the problem is this. It's not that cliques exist. Everyone has friends. Everyone has people to talk to privately for support. It's when it becomes too obvious. And then you even know, like, that guy's with them. And somehow they always agree on the same thing. And even worse, when one of them is disagreeing with some I call, for example, you just, it's the joke is, this is how I basically figured out years ago, Liege was like a little bit of a douchebag back in the day. Because the premise was he would none of his teammates ever heard him ever criticize him like openly. But then the joke is every time he did something, it's like you'd see him on his computer, his Steam box would open, he'd be typing, and then you'd just look on the line, and it's like, oh, I can see Nitro's typing in his Steam box, and you just know immediately, like, he's saying to him, I fucked it up, you know, like and this doesn't sound like a big deal, but mate, I almost never hear about this in the European teams. Like, it's just not like, I'm sure it happens, but it doesn't seem like it tears teams apart like this.
Well, I mean, you say that, but I'm sure it does exist to a certain extent. Is the UK part of European team?
Oh, I'm sure. We got the same problem you do, don't worry about that. Yeah. By the way, no joke. If we're going to divide up regions, UK is way more like NA than it is like Europe, for sure. Like mainland Europe, we are.
I feel like, I mean, obviously, I didn't come from Counter-Strike, but at least from my experience in Rainbow Six and even back in Overwatch, like the UK is very cliquey. Like in any competitive game, it gets so cliquey. So I can believe that.
We even had a similar problem they do, though, which is like this. Because of the clique angle, right? The worst angle of it is, like, famously, you have a LAN and then someone has to be kicked if you don't win the LAN. Like, that's just that was just default in UK Counter-Strike. And as far as I can tell, it's sort of the NA vibe in games like this, because actually it loads back to what I said in the intro. There's too many teams that want in. There's only so many spots. And so I feel like in Valorant, compared to even CSGO, like, there's almost an incentive to change rosters constantly if you don't think you've got it yet.
I agree and disagree. So, like, I think that the same thing happened in CS. I don't think it's a Valorant exclusive thing. That's why I disagree. So I agree that it happens where, like, people better deal each other, get their friends on the team, all the nepotism. I think that does exist to a certain degree. And you get, like, bad players that are picked up for, like, good teams just because they're buddies on their roster, for example. I think that happens all the time, but in both games and probably other games that I don't even follow. I do think it is like, it might be like a North American thing. I don't know enough about the European players or teams or scene to be able to pass judgment on that and say like whether it does or doesn't happen. I think it's a little bit, I mean, I'm sure it does happen. Like I can see it happen on, oh, dare I say this, teams from a particular country in South America might do that same thing.
Kept that nice and big. Okay. I know, exactly. Whatever. I think we can guess on that one. Okay.
Like I'm not that old yet, you know? Okay, so I think it does happen. I think it happens in both games, but it happens and I don't think it should happen as much as it does. Esports is like one of those things. It's a business, but it's also like you make all your friends in the scene. And when you're playing with your friends, like you want to, like there's lots of players that, especially before they get their like real like big shot, they're always playing with their friends and they're just better than their friends. And they're like getting offers from these better teams. Like, oh, I don't want to leave all my friends behind. At the end of the day, like if you don't perform and you don't like build like a big brand, you're going to get left behind. And at some point you need to just like drop the dead weight, so to speak, and leave your friends behind and be like, yo, I still want to be your friend. I still want to hang out and play, but like I have a really good opportunity over here. I'd like to be able to take this opportunity and play on this good team. And we like people shouldn't be looking to just like, it's okay if you're like on good terms with teammates. It's okay if you're friendly with them, and it's okay if you're like best friends with them. But you don't have to seek out teammates that are your best friends and then become teammates. You can become teammates and then you can develop good, long-lasting friendships. Or sometimes it's just like you just get along. Outside of the game, you don't really like interact that much, and you know you have your different friend groups or whatever. But then you come and you just get the job done, and you just put your head down and work, and you don't hate the person, you don't despise them, you get along. But like outside, it's just like we don't share the same interests. You like anime, I like dramas. Yeah, you like rap, I like classic rock. It's the way of the world. Not everyone's gonna like have matching interests in everything. It's just, can you get the job done? Yes or no? That's it.
Okay.
I'm super curious. So, you spoke about this kind of skepticism around the longevity of the team when you were on it, and whoever was not liking whom. But when you then left, and especially after Nitro left, which wasn't too long after you left, did you think that you could kind of to an extent foresee some of the problems that then popped up with 100 Thieves a little later?
Oh, I could. Yeah, I mean, I did foresee it, and other people that asked me about like what happened around 100 Thieves. I told them like exactly what I thought happened and what would happen in the future, and like everything I said came to be. I think the issues was more than just like a personality thing. It was like when I was first released from 100 Thieves or put on the bench or whatever the case was, and there was like this thing like, oh, Steele and the coach couldn't get along, and the toxicity because of it is why he got dropped. It's like, well, is that really the case? Because like it was like a lot of like 2 versus 1 versus 1 versus 1 type of stuff where it's like,
right.
Like Hiko and Asuna, they just wanted like everyone to get along. They're just like, whatever you guys want, like I'm gonna get behind. I'm not gonna really have, I'm not gonna take sides or anything like that. So the coach had like a very specific way of how he approached the game and how he viewed like how things should be done, and it was largely based on like just raw stats and not a lot of like eye test type of stuff. So if you think in theory on paper about a certain synergy of something, in theory it sounds like insane, but then like when you actually try to like execute that, it doesn't work that way. So we would have disagreements with that, but it didn't end there. It's not like it was just me and him. Like there's other people on the team that also sometimes sided with me, sometimes sided with him, sometimes just had a completely different opinion, and there were just a lot of opinions, and there wasn't enough like space for all of them. But then like beyond that, there was also the whole like secret messages or whatever that I know that some existed for a fact, and I'm sure there were more, but I mean, at that point, it's like speculating that there was more than there actually was. But just from what I personally know, what I was personally like messaged, what I personally heard from not only other players, but management, I knew this stuff was happening. And it happened before, because it happened when we replaced Dicey and we were getting a replacement. The same backdoor messaging happened there. So it's like we said, okay, no more of this, like everything out in the open. And that didn't happen. So, I mean, what are you going to do?
By the way, when you say that last part, like out in the open, like you just want like open communication, like you can have the opinion, maybe they want this player in instead, or someone's not pulling their weight. Is it just that angle? Is there any element of like, for example, as the leader, do you think you should have like full buy-in for people? If they're going to be on your team, they do it your way, and if it doesn't work, okay, we can review it later. But you gotta like go all in at first, right?
Yeah. So that was actually, that's a good point. So the coach actually was the most vocal and like the first one to actually say, look guys, like there's way too much shit going on here. We asked Josh to be the IGL. We need to let him like call. We need to like, do his ideas and everything. And we need to buy into it, because we can't be like doing 3 different things all at the same time. Like when we see that we lose games, it's because we're doing different things. We're on different pages. We need to buy into his system. And he was like the first one to kind of like give me the keys, so to speak, about that type of stuff. So yeah, I mean, that did happen. I forgot the first part of the question now.
It's all right. But it's along those lines, the question I would have is this, actually, is how does it compare to being a leader in CSGO? Because actually, when I look at some of your teammates that we're talking about from CSGO, a lot of them, mate, were in the teams that just sort of like, the NA style at the time was you just did defaults and players do things off their own brilliance. If someone's great at entries, they jiggle peek the corner, they get the kill. It's not really the tactic that made them do it. So I also wondered that, like, a lot of them weren't coming from your style of team, but you're more, to me, sort of the traditional IGL in Counter-Strike where you have the game plan, right?
I don't really have that much of a game. So
okay,
I have a lot of like, I guess like layered like protocols, or just like just overall philosophy of how I approach the game. I'll approach it in the sense that like kind of if your opponent's not like, if they're giving you everything, just take it from them. If they're making you respect them, then you can respect them. But if they're not, requiring any respect, then just go and just do whatever you want. It's very loose like there's a structured like framework type of thing, but it's like very loose. Individuals have freedom to do whatever. It's like the end goal is like, let's say the end goal is we want to end A. Whatever you can do to help us go A works. If that means that you're going to go towards B and throw, like if it's CS, you throw a smoke and a couple flashes at like B tunnels of dust too, and then you're going to shift walk over like mid doors and you're going to backstab them as they rotate, and everyone else is like working up cat, and we say like, let's go, let's end A, heavy up cat, three up cat or something like that. You know, the lurker, I'm not sitting there telling the lurker like, yo, stay B tunnels, or yo, go walk out mid doors, or yo, group with us cat.
You're not microing them. Right. I'm
not microing them. You should be equipped enough to know, are they just like ignoring you? Oh, he's just faking this every round. I'm just going to over rotate and ignore him. He's not going to lurk out and then call his team back to B. Or are they going to try to like rotate through like super fast and he wants to cut them off mid doors? You know, that's onto that individual to kind of make that decision. Okay. It's on the decision of the long player, what he's going to do in that situation. It's the same in Valorant. So in Valorant, you still have the same like goals, like let's start with this and let's shift into that and let's look to end here. And provided that nothing changes like in the round, like, oh, we think that they're playing this setup, and unless they are not doing the setup, and it's obvious that they're not doing the setup, in which case we'll cancel, we will try to like do this end goal because this is how they're playing and this is a good way to end against it. How can we set ourselves up that we have the most success doing that, executing that end goal? And then people should have the individual freedom to kind of get to that part. So if they want to be more aggressive, cool. If they want to be more passive, cool. If they want to group quicker, cool. If they know like, oh, the enemy, every time you do all this stuff towards A, they push through B, I'm just going to sit outside B and kill them, cool. Like if that gets the job done, that gets the job done. And as long as you're working towards that common end goal, that's how it should be. But the thing that this style requires is that everyone needs to have like self-autonomy. People can't be microed. If you have to micro people, then everything falls apart. And you can't be rigid. You can't do the same thing every round. Otherwise, people will catch on to what you're doing. And you need to be active and proactive. You can't just react to what the opponent's doing. You need to be able to like be like, okay, I'm going to do this over here and I'm going to shift over there. Or like, oh, the enemies are like working A main. I'm going to just like stall them at A main. I'm going to go call my team over to mid, and we're going to do a mid fight together. I'm going to call all my teammates over and we're going to do a mid fight because they just saw us there. They're spread apart. Let's go kill them there together. So it requires a lot of like proactivity, staying on your feet, always changing things up like on an individual level, not just like a team level, and just working towards a common goal. A common end goal with some individuality. And then obviously like you'll talk about things like, you know, you've just tried going and doing this play like 4 rounds in a row and you got shut down each time. Like you got to either ask for a teammate to help you. If you're trying to do something, it's not working, you need to ask for help, or you need to do something else. Or you need to like at least like relay that info and say like, hey, like you asked me to do this and I can't do this because the enemies are playing 5 people here and they're just killing me every time. We can either do other plan, or I need help to do this. And that's basically how it boils down.
I'm really curious because so after you left, 100 Thieves basically went through 3 IGLs in the space of a couple of months. It went to Nitro, then it went to Eccles, and then it went to Ethan afterwards. What were your thoughts on that? And do you think, you know, given everything that you've just described about your own style of IGLing, which provides a lot of freedom to your teammates, do you think that going through 3 different IGLs is detrimental to the development of the team? And do you think that had a big part to play in why 100 Thieves wasn't seeing good results?
I think there could be some detriment if you're switching IGLs and you have players that are playing a certain style and the IGL has a very different style. I think it largely comes down to the players that you have and what styles they are really good at. So for example, like if I'm going to use like Asuna and Hiko as examples as past teammates, Hiko was a very he was excelled in styles that like everything was kind of mapped out and he would know exactly what he's supposed to do, and he could go boom 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 just step by step and do everything. And Asuna was more like, I see an opportunity, I'm taking it, bye. And it's like, keep up with me or I'm going to be there and you're going to be in spawn still. And I don't think like switching IGLs is necessarily a detriment. I think it just comes down to the style of the IGL's calls, or like the calling style. I think it comes down to just the overall macro and just the mid rounding. And sometimes like one of those things that you can't really do as an IGL all the time is mid round. People think that, oh, the IGL, they're talking start round, they're talking mid round, and they just call everything, absolutely everything, micro every little decision. That's not the case. And when it comes to mid rounding, especially, like IGLs are there. Like obviously you will call mid round plays and say like, yo, let's audible this way, let's do this something else. A lot of the time is you are kind of like giving that affirmative call to someone else, like the lurker or the entry players, like, yo, we can go now. And then the IGL says, okay, let's send it. Or the lurker says, hey, we should come back B. They're rotating off. The IGL says, okay, we're going to cancel strat and go back to B. So a lot of that happens, and sometimes there's people aren't on the same page with that type of stuff. So it's not necessarily the IGL. If we're talking Nitro, Eccles, or Ethan, it could also be like what's happening in the mid rounds, and people could over or undercompensate based off of how overbearing the IGL could be. So if the IGL is like really hands off and just says like, let's default at the start of the round, that's it, then other people might take it into their own hands to start calling like all the mid-round plays that are happening and all the, where are we going to end and everything that happens in the middle of the round. And if there's an IGL that's like microing every single step of the way, then other people might not, make all these other calls in the middle of the round. And then, that might screw with people a little bit because they're not familiar with that, or they don't know like what they're allowed to do in this like imaginary like box of am I allowed to go for this or not type of thing. And people just put themselves and restrict them in this box of like, I'm on this agent, I can't do this push because I need to live, my life's more important than that player.
One thing with that particular 100 Thieves lineup, especially the classic lineup that you had that I want to ask about, is it seems like the timing is also fairly similar to when actually other orgs started to slowly, either the people who wanted to go back to CSGO went back to CSGO, or they slowly shed what were the names from CSGO for just Valorant people who maybe had no history in CSGO and it was just a good player now, right? Do you actually get the sense with that player, like the names all looked great on paper, like look, the Hiko one's more just for the big name, he hadn't been a relevant player in Counter-Strike for many, many years, but you, Ethan and Nitro were all obviously competent tier 1 players at the end of CSGO when you chose to transition. Do you actually think, like, I get why initially people got the CSGO talent, the logic is you're just good at tactical FPS, let's see if you're good at this one. Do you get the vibe that, like, was this collection of players not as good as the names? Like, do you actually think now it's not as big a deal to have CSGO experience? Should you just recruit people who are just good at Valorant?
I think even now and into the future, players that are just like exclusively Valorant experience are still going to be like really good, and maybe even like the star players, like the top 5 that we talk about and at the end of every year. I think CS experience, especially towards like the beginning of Valorant, was very crucial because a lot of the fundamentals did translate over about like clearing your corners, about like if the enemy is down numbers, like they're going to keep pushing, you can slow down,
right.
They're going to just run into you and you're going to punish them. Like all of these things still translate, how to approach clutch situations, like all of these things. But then the people that couldn't separate that CS is this different game. Valorant's not just like CS with like reskinned, that there's different abilities. You can't play in like these one and done positions because they have like this thing that gives them wall hacks and then you're just done for. They have like a laser beam that shoots through a wall, like you can't play certain positions. They have this flash that you can't even anti-play, like it's either you're blind or you're not blind, like there's no like you turn from it and you're only partial blind type of thing. Yes. Like an Omen flash, for example. So a lot of CS players couldn't like figure out that it's a new game and you can't play it exactly like one for one. But then there's a lot of players that took what they learned from CS when it came to fundamentals, when it came to team play, when it came to work ethic outside of the game, about going into a custom game and learning like a lineup, or learning like how to like practice peeking a certain angle, learning map timings and how long does it take to get from this point to that point. All of that, if you had CS experience and you've done all that legwork, it means that in Valorant, you have that cheat code in the sense that you don't have to learn that from scratch. And a lot of these Valorant players are learning that stuff from scratch, where they never knew to even think about looking at the game like that. But now you're getting to a point where everyone that's been playing Valorant since beta is probably going to even have a leg up on the people that are, if they want to just transition now from CS, for example, and haven't been playing like ranked games all along, because things go in and out of meta all the time, especially if there's like new maps or agent changes, agent buffs and nerfs, things that we saw back in First Strike, back in like 2020 winter, we're going to start seeing that again, as like, Astra came into meta and everyone switched to Astra and everyone forgot about like the 5-man Jet Reyna just like rushing everything. And now Astra's out of meta and you're adding things like Yoru and Neon, and you have breach stuns that are like really strong. So a lot of like faster pace, like dive comps, so to speak. But like when agents come in and out of meta, like the people that have played those agents before, played in similar sorts of metas before, are going to be better. They're going to pick up this new meta quicker. It's like it was fast paced, then it was really slow, then it was like middle speed, and now it's fast again. The people that originally played that first fast pace are going to be like really comfortable in the new fast pace, whereas the people that started when it was like really slow are going to be like, why is everyone rushing everything? This game should be slower. And that transition phase is where people are going to fall behind, and where the people that started on Valorant are going to excel, or the people that played MOBAs that, especially like League, that go through these meta shifts constantly are going to excel, or people that played Overwatch. When I played Overwatch, like it was even like that short period, like I played for like 4 months or something. I saw like 3 different metas at that point. So it's like, you need to be able to keep up with that.
Sure. What about this then? One thing we haven't talked about with any of the people we've had from CSGO that I want to ask you about. You touched on it there. When you said the explanation, like for example in Counter-Strike, you find a little nook, you just take an angle, they're not going to expect this off angle. I'm going to get the first guy at least, maybe they trade me. The reason why that also doesn't work, like you say, is there are literally agents that essentially can see through walls, who can do different, like all the utility things they can do. Right? One thing I wondered that must be different about being an IGL in that sense is because in Counter-Strike, every character is the same character. You just provide the difference in terms of how you play it. Right, there's an element of MOBA that doesn't exist in Counter-Strike, which is this. Essentially in MOBA, one thing that can be confusing is, because you don't play yourself all the other roles at a world-class level, essentially that's part of what coaching is actually explaining to a player what the other people in the other team can do to you. And I've heard, for example, like when a new champion gets released in League, there was an example here where, if anyone knows the game, when they released an ADC champion called Aphelios, it was one that had a super complicated kit that even had like RNG elements in it as to what gun you had at different points in time. And it meant that it wasn't as simple as like, he does this one thing here, right, avoid that. It was more like you had to know, like, depending on the situation, what he wants to do, what he wants you to do. And so it was actually mega complicated. And I heard basically those coaches just got their player who played the ADC role, and they sort of had him do like a little presentation almost like to his teammates, like, right, when they have this champion, here's what they're going to want to do, here's how we're going to avoid it, like, understand I'm going to call for these. And essentially, like, he almost had to, like I say, give like the scouting report for one role. So is it similar when you're trying to like figure out how to do things in Valorant? Because it must be very different to CS in that regard.
Yeah, there is a lot of what you described in Valorant. So like when you talk about like game plans, for example, or like that I would do a game plan, like my sort of game planning in this game would be, we're playing a certain map, and this map, like obviously like we prioritize this position over that position, but let's look at the enemy's composition. What do they have? Oh, they're running Astra, Sage, Breach, Raze. That means that if you go into a certain position, their Astra has the gravity well, the Breach has a stun, the Raze will throw a nade at you. So you need to be able to find out like where they're setting up their traps. They're not going to run at you, guns out. They're going to set up traps, and then they're going to spring their traps at a certain point of the map. You need to find out where they're setting up that trap. You need to bait that trap, spring it, and then you need to make a reaction before they're getting their abilities off of cooldown. So Split's like a perfect map to talk about when it comes to this, because everyone sets up their breach stun, raise nade towards like B heaven area, and then maybe there's like an alarm bot or a camera or something that sees it, and then that's when they spring their trap. And you have an agent like, Raze can go in and break stuff, or Chamber can go in, place a teleporter down. When the stun nade comes in, he teleports out, gets back to safety, and then you're like, okay, let's make our end goal right now, and let's execute. Their trap's gone. We can play the game now. That absolutely exists. So that's where the game plan comes in. It's like, this team, they have like no CC ability. Let's just run at them. They can't stop us. Run them down 5 people. This team, they have like really good CC for like one choke only. So if we're going to attack them, we need to bait it out at one choke, and then we split them. So we go from 2 different chokes at the same time. They can only lock down one or the other. They have to pick, and then we just seesaw them basically. That absolutely exists, and you just have to look at like what player or what agents are on the other team. But when it comes to other things like breaking down what like an agent can do or can't do. I think right now the game's very young. There's not so many agents. Everyone understands like all the agents. But one thing I learned from playing, StarCraft 2 or playing Dota 2 is that anytime like a new StarCraft 2 wasn't so much like a new thing. It was more Dota, like a new hero or something comes out. I always went into like there's like the demo thing in Dota where you could just like pick the hero, you can level it up, give yourself
it's like a sandbox type mode, right? You can just do whatever you want. Yeah.
You can give yourself whatever items you want, so you can see how that combos with whatever. You can spawn like enemy heroes, so you can see what your abilities do. I always did that, and then I would go and play the hero in a ranked game to just like learn about them, because like the worst thing is you go into a game and you play against a hero that you've like is brand new, you've never seen them before, and you're like literally like hovering your cursor over the tooltip to see what are these spells, like what is this thing, like I can't even move, I can't cast spells, like what's going on, like it's piercing spell immunity, like what's going on, magic immunity, and you just don't know what's going on. It's like play the agents. That's why I've always said since like I started playing Valorant, people should play every agent, and like at least in custom games or unrated, just to like learn the agent and just like get a feel for it. Even if it's like something as simple as like Raze, like Raze has a grenade, but like try double satcheling and see like
and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So you should like at least on some base level understand that every individual should know that. They should know how it is to Sova ulti if you're close to someone versus if you're far from someone. Everyone should know how long it takes for like a molly to land, or like if you throw a molly at like some like slant on the ground, it's going to do some weird bounce. Like everyone should understand this, and then you should be able to understand it, because that's how you're going to be able to counterplay it. Can you counterplay it? How does it feel to be on like each end of it? You have to put yourself in your opponent's shoes, or you have to put yourself in your teammate's shoes. Like you're asking your teammate to do something. It's like, dude, I can't do that. Like I can't satchel from this side of the map to that side of the map with double satchel. I can go only that far. And it's the same thing with coaches. I think some coaches like understand game theory really well. I think they understand characters and agents and synergies really well. I think they understand like map dynamics really well. But one thing they might not understand is individual player limitations. Like if you're talking a simple, or you're talking about like a CNET or something, like if you're talking this game or TENS or whatever, those individuals have certain limitations where vast majority of players, you say like, these are your limitations, but you are like an outlying factor and you can get away with this. And I think a lot of coaches, especially if they don't have like a pro playing background, they might not understand like what people can or can't get away with, or they might not understand if you're feeling really confident and you're just like absolutely slamming the other team and you're like 20-6 for like scoreline and you have a 3K in the round, you're gonna keep peaking because you're getting those kills. And even though like, statistically speaking, you shouldn't go for this play, it's too greedy, whatever, like when you're playing, you need to be like in tune with your confidence, with your just everything about your instinct, everything. You need to be as one, like mind, body, whatever. And then you can't just be looking just at like stats, like, oh, you have man advantage, play the advantage, fall back. Like you can't do that.
Sure.
This actually kind of reminds me of like something which I was always curious about, which it's a little bit tangential, but I think this is something that also exists in League of Legends, but I'm going to give an example that I remember from Overwatch, which is that the Dallas Fuel, so Envy's franchise, they adopted a system where they specifically had coaches for each role. So it was like there was a tank coach, there was a DPS coach, and there was a support coach. And I always wondered at the time, like, is that actually too fragmented? Like, and what you're just describing here about like how everyone needs to understand everything and should have experience, and how some coaches look at things from like a perspective that doesn't necessarily consider these other aspects of the game. And I understand a couple of the examples you just gave were about like the actual feelings of the players and the situation the players in game. But like, I'm just wondering, like, unless I'm mistaken, in Valorant, I don't think we're at a point where like teams are hiring like an initiator coach and a smokes coach or whatever. But like, is that something that you would say is not necessarily a good thing because of the fact that it doesn't force you to sort of cross-pollinate the understanding of different roles?
Yeah, I think that would be too fragmented. I think it's good for people to talk. And it's another thing that I talk about a lot, especially like with my stream, is when you have players, like you're an aspiring pro or you're a current pro, you should be talking about the game with other pros. Like that's such a cheat code in getting better, is just like sharing ideas or beliefs about the game, whether you agree or not. Like having more perspectives is never a bad thing. And it's always good to just be like, I'm going to talk to this person even though I don't like them, or I'm going to talk to this guy about like this match that's going on. Oh, like you want to watch these VCT matches, and let's, you know, whether it's making fun of people or not, whatever, you can watch the games and you can talk about the games and be like, why is this guy doing that? Oh, he did that because, and then you just learn something new. So you should always be talking about the game with other people, and as you said, cross-pollinate. So I think it's the same thing when it comes to like coaches and players, because I think even when it comes to players, I feel like in Overwatch it was more like I don't know which word to use. I don't want to say rigid or something, but like a tank player plays tanks. A DPS player plays DPS.
It was even smaller. It was like a main tank player plays main tank, an off tank player plays off tank. Yeah.
So in Valorant, it's like I feel like people should be more flexible in their roles, and I think where people kind of don't understand why like certain people should be on certain roles is I think it should come down to individual style. This player is more aggressive. They should have more tools so that they can, you know, mobility tools or tools so that they can fight people with, and they can just like, you know, whether it be like a dash or a smoke or like a flash or something like that, they can fight with these tools. And then players that are more passive, more reserved, more support type players in style that are like, I'm just going to do like all the high percentage plays. I'm going to play like, I'm not going to take that many risks. I'm going to be risk averse. I'm going to like, my teammate needs my help, I'm there to help them. They should be on things like, you know, potentially smoke agents or teams agents that have like darts and drones and stuff like that. Because that's just going to be naturally how it works. But outside of that, it doesn't necessarily matter what agent you're on. So you can play a smoke agent very aggressively, and you can use the smokes to aggressively like help you take map control and help you take fights, and you can play in the smokes and you can be really aggressive with it. Or you can have a smoke player that's very passive with the stuff, and you can have like a chamber that's really aggressively like looking for kills, and you can have like the turret guy that's just sitting there posting up waiting for everyone else to do everything, and they're just cleaning up and then clutching up the round at the end of the round. And I think no matter what it is, you're going to have people that are switching between like maybe they're on initiator, and then maybe they're on duelist, and then maybe they're on like a second controller, and they're going to be like moving around roles. And roles, I feel like the way that the nomenclature, I feel like the way that the word's been put into the game by Riot isn't really like, I feel like people play to the roles too much, like in a box, like, oh, I'm a sentinel, I'm flank watcher, I am this, I can't do anything outside of this box, I cannot do anything. And the same thing with like duelist. Oh, you're duelist, you have to send it in, and we can never see a duelist ever lurk or flank or anything like that ever, like on attack. Like the lurker can never lurk. The duelist can never lurk because they're supposed to open the site. They're the entry players. It's like, yeah, but then you see like the Jet in a certain area. Oh, Jet's A, they're going to do an A play. It's like, imagine the Jet's A and the rest of the team's going B, and the Jet's part of the perfect fit, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So it's like, you need to be able to kind of like just blur those lines, and people need to be able to move between different roles and know exactly how they're supposed to like play that role. But also teams should be looking to put the players on certain agents that make sense for like the rest of the style. Like if you're the most aggressive player on the team and everyone else are passive and they're like sitting behind, they should be on agents that can support you, and you should be on an agent that can like seek out those duels. And that's basically how it should boil down. You shouldn't have people that are super reserved on aggressive roles and people that are super aggressive, like, you know, you're just like making them sit back and just watch the action.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, by the way, this topic of roles is one that actually I always have people 24/7 coming at me in CSGO, right? Because I made a video a long, long time ago where I explained the concept of different roles you could have in a team, right? But you can tell people never actually listened to the video. They only sort of heard the sort of headline version because they thought my version was like that. It's like there's 5 roles. One is like support, one is entry, you know, and every team has to have this. What they don't understand is why I actually explained in the video was that famous premise that the roles in basketball, for example, they even say this famous line that they were invented to to explain to the layman roughly what the game is played like. It's not really a set thing. Like, as you say, if you're the point guard, right? Yes, in theory, the point guard passes the ball. If the point guard's LeBron James, he just scores the ball whenever he wants, by the way. He's the best player, so obviously if he has the best shot, he takes it. That's actually how you should play, like you say. You play to your strengths and your personnel. So I would even say, I think some of that shit sort of comes from... I think some of it comes from League of Legends and the fact it's another Riot game, because I have to say, you know this if you play Dota, even though in theory it also has the 5 roles based on like farm distribution, in Dota it's way more about what heroes you have, who's on your team. Like famously, there were some mega teams in Dota who the 3-position player was like absurdly fucking good, so guess what, they let him farm up way more than you normally would, whereas, you know, 3 positions supposed to be the one who sort of like takes a bit less, is in like the lower part of the farm distribution compared to the 1 and the 2, the carry and the mid player. So like I would say that angle's a bit stretched by people. And on the coaching part, even in League, right, there are certain teams have it, Gio. Like there might be a team like has like a top lane positional coach, but it's very rare they ever had like all 5. It was usually, as far as I can tell, if one of your coaching staff just happened to be a specialist at that role. And even then, it's not like he coaches you like, right, I'm sort of your mini coach. It was more like he was almost like your assistant. It's like he would come to, say, the top lane player and he'd be like, right, here's all the new picks they're doing in Korea and here's how they play this matchup. And it's more like he was just there to like individually help you. Like, you having problems with matchup I need to talk to the other coach about. And I also thought the logic was, in theory, you were trying to use the coaching aspect to be more responsible how the team communicates. So instead of like the top laner in League just being like, oh, you're all like, never give me any resources or ganks, it sounds like he's just whining. Like if you actually have a real coach studies it, like, no, actually, you know, his champion he plays doesn't really play the way we're trying to win our team comp. It would be like a more like reasonable way to have that discussion, instead of like, if you know how League is, it's almost like solo queue. Like the players themselves are complaining. Like the joke is, even in pro teams, people are like blaming the jungler because he's not in all lanes at once. He's like, bro, I'm a pro player jungler. Like, that's just how it is. So yeah, there's some of that for sure. Because I always thought the same thing, Steele. To me, even in Counter-Strike, there aren't set roles like that. Like, you know this, if you don't have an amazing AWP, you don't have to run the AWP all the time. You run it minimally when you can on the sides where someone can hold that one spot with an AWP. Or you have like a player, like maybe like when you AWP'd, you just use it tactically as the IGL to spot a line to see where they are, and then you hold an angle. You're not using it like Simple would, because I would tie it into that, mate. That's where the coach gets lost, in my opinion. But
hey, I used to be a primary up, and I used to do this stuff
a long time ago. Yeah.
A long time ago. Hey, it was only a decade ago. Relax.
True. No, it's not to me. That's only half my career. So yeah, it wasn't that long ago at all. No biggie. Here's what I would say, though. What you say is correct, right? The coaches, here's where I get why they think this way. They're looking at the game, like you said, from a game theory angle. That's the perfect way to say it. They look at the game like it's chess. But here's the analogy I would give to the coach. This is like if it was chess, but the actual how strong the piece is based on something other than what the piece's rank is. So to use your analogy, in Counter-Strike, if my like lurker piece, let's say, I don't know, randomly we're going to say it's like the bishop or something, that's simple in my case. Whereas on your other team, maybe it's some like player half as good. Well, I'm obviously going to do different things if I have simple as that piece than if I have a player barely competent at that role. So yeah, I think that's the problem with the coaches, because I see that in League and the games where you draft a lot, mate. They really do put together what in like a perfect simulation would be a great draft. But then when you look at their team or the opponent, you're like, dude, this is a terrible draft. Like, your guys can't do some of the shit you want, and what you're thinking is going to play out ain't going to play out. Like, as I say, that's simple in that role, and you're acting like it's just generic player A. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, and also just like in general, like ability combinations and stuff, you know, like not even thinking about the player behind the agents. You know, you have certain ability combinations on the opposing team, then yeah, maybe certain set plays that you have in mind are just going to go straight out the window, because like they're just going to get eaten alive the second that you try and execute them.
How do you actually find that angle as well, Steele? Because that must be the other weird thing. Like, even though economy and how you use the utility was a big deal in CSGO, we didn't have abilities. Like, ability to basically a utility half the time, right? So how is that angle to work with?
In terms of what specifically? Just like
how do you, as an IGL, is it trickier? Is it more like setting up around a specific thing that someone does in the same way as if you had like 2 smokes, you want to use only one on this side? Is there more of that? Is it just, do the players decide that stuff more?
I think it's different, and I think it also like depends on your approach. So in CS even, you would basically boil it down to like, okay, bare bones, we're going overpass B. We have a smoke and 2 flashes. Where do we want these to go? Okay, if we're coming short heavy, we do the smoke in the same spot every time. It's like, do you pick bridge or do you pick mid site? And then you say, okay, if we're coming short heavy, we do this flash and then that flash, the initial like pop flash to set us up, and then the flash to like blind everyone so we can actually spill out. And if we're coming long heavy, like through monster, you do these other flashes. It's the same thing in Valorant. Okay, we want to end on whatever, A site ascent. You just pick one smoke that you need, and then like everything else is basically like bonus. If you have like a Jet on your team and she has a dash and a smoke, she can choose to do this. But if she doesn't have that, then you have to figure something else out. Do you have a dart? Yes or no? And it's like at the end of the day, you just need to boil it down to bare bones. Bare minimum, what do we need to go into this site? And then are we waiting for that to come off cooldown? If it's on cooldown, for example, yes or no? Or are we just going without it? And I wouldn't say the game's necessarily trickier or less tricky than CS. I think it's just different. So in CS, it was very easy to count like, oh, you can hear the smokes across the map, 5 smokes. They have like, potentially 5 mollies. And then between HEs and flashes, there would be like 5 HEs and then at most 5, up to 10 flashes, but maybe 5. And it's like really easy to keep track of like what the enemy has left in terms of smokes and be like, okay, this is the last smoke. They smoked at 47. It's gone at 30. At 32, we're going to throw our smokes and flashes and we're just going to pop on them. They're out of util. Done. And it's very easy to keep track of that type of info. And as an IGL, like you can keep track of everything on your own. But in Valorant, it's on like a lot of individuals to kind of keep track of things. You need to keep track of the smokes and then darts on cooldown. Breach has stun still, and then they've used 1 flash, but it's going to come off cooldown. And all these things are going to be constantly changing because things
are these all just being commed? Do people type any of them? Do they just come verbally? What do they do?
It should be commed verbally. So like something I do, for example, is I'll be like, okay, Omen smoked 115. It's gone at 1 minute. Or Viper walled at like 1 minute, it's gone at 45. You know how long like a smoke will last for, and then you can get timings of like when is the next action going to happen. And it should be the same thing with like they have no dog, they have no drone. I broke both Cypher trips, killed her turrets broken. Stuff like this should absolutely be calmed. And if possible, you should also note the time when it was broken or when it was like whatever, when it's going to go away, when it's going to come back off cooldown. That should absolutely be calmed and shared because that's telling the other players on the team what they can or cannot do or should not do. I should wait for this because they have it, or I should not wait for this because it's on cooldown. I need to fucking go now. So as an IGL in Valorant, a lot of it comes down to how vocal are your teammates and how autonomous are they? Like, are they going to go and make their own decisions? Are they going to make mini plans between themselves? If like 2 people are working a certain part of the map, are they going to make plans on them by themselves, or do you make it for them? Is there someone going to suggest ideas like, dude, I just saw this, like when they do this, they're over rotating to A, we can go B now, and you have someone else like be a secondary voice that you can just be like, okay, yeah, we're B splitting, or let's regroup B main. That absolutely needs to happen, and you need to have a lot more people talking in this game because there's just so much more stuff to keep track of that you just can't. It's like playing StarCraft where you have to keep track of like all these timings. But I feel like when I was only like Masters level Thorin, and even that, a lot of it was like instinctual of like when I'm gonna get enough minerals to like rebuild an army, and when have I like spammed like building a new army that I have to get my SCVs to build more supply depots and stuff like that. And it's about this time I need to like group my guys up in this medevac and go and do like a drop on their expansion. All of that is just like one flow because it's just like, it's just instinctual. You have these built-in timings and everything. But when you play Valorant, you don't have these built-in timings because every team's going to play different. Their composition's going to be different agents. They have a different mixture of agents. So like this team's running Astra and Sage, and that team's running Omen and Breach. It's like different things. So you need your teammates to be able to speak up and give suggestions and make note of like important things that have happened throughout the round. Yeah, absolutely.
I think like one of the things that has always drawn me so much to hero shooters, and I suppose this is also applicable to MOBAs as well, but is the fact that you have to like time so much stuff in the sense of not just like, oh, we want to use this piece of utility because it benefits us in this really direct way, but also like we also need to consider that we might need to use this piece of utility or this ultimate to bait out a piece of their utility or their ultimate so that then we have an advantage like indirectly from that. So it adds all of these layers to it, which like I as someone who this is like the only really like esports game genre that I've ever been in is something I really admire, and yet I still fail to understand how people are like proficient enough at it to actually be able to do it to a good level. But like that's always been one of the biggest things that impresses me about this type of game is there's so many moving parts and so many different reasons why a piece of utility usage might benefit you, but also like it's a sacrifice as well, right? Because it's like, okay, well, we're relinquishing
trading resources.
Exactly, like we're relinquishing the fact that we can use it in situation A because we're banking on it working for situation B, and then that providing like a bigger reward at the end.
Yeah. So this is one of the things I learned from playing Hearthstone is like health is a resource. So you have all these like, different resources to help you like achieve your end goal. Your end goal is to win the round. So if you're on attack, you want to either eliminate all the defenders or you want to have the spike explode. So how can we get into the situation where one of those two things can happen? Well, we have to go through these roadblocks. They have these abilities. They have these ultimates. And the IGL could say like, okay, like they're going to use this ultimate. If I use my Killjoy ulti, they're going to Sova ulti it to break it. But like they might not use their Sova ulti to break it. So you need to have like contingency plans or like plan Bs almost. But also you have to, on an individual level, be able to identify things like we're pushing into A site on attack and one of the defenders killed one of our guys and he got his ulti from that kill. Now they have the ulti and we didn't really account for that. Hey, I'm making a plan right now. They have this ulti. As soon as we plant, they're going to do this. We need to do action, whether it be like push into them or fall back out of the site, play the post-plant lineups or whatever. It doesn't matter. People need to be able to make contingency plans and change things on the fly. If like things aren't going according to plan, like you need to be able to just like roll with the punches, just thrive in the chaos and just understand that information's always going to change. Everything's going to change. And you need to be able to keep up with it and make your own decisions on an individual level.
Yeah, I know that concept actually on a smaller level actually exists in League of Legends when you lane. Like there are certain matchups where essentially you trade like some health if they want to harass you so they have less mana so then they can't do the spells at the same time. And essentially it's like how you know the flow of the lane. If you understand that principle, like my champion has more health than his so I can actually trade it and be at like half health because he can't kill me because he doesn't have the mana, etc. It sounds complicated, but again it just ties back into what G was saying. It's like if you want to be a pro player, by the way, this is why I always say the worst thing we do is call them bloody players because it makes it sound like it's fun to fucking scrim and practice. Like, it's work. It's hard work. Like as you can imagine, what he's talking about here, that's just being a player. Imagine being the IGL. Like you essentially just exist in a permanent state of anxiety that at some point there's something new you have to think about and factor in, right? And as you say, it's imperfect information. You can never actually know all the info in the scenario.
Yeah.
It's pretty brutal. Sure.
It's rough out here.
Right, I want to do this. Let's talk. Should we talk a bit about the T1 team now? There's some good news. Because here's the thing. I was even thinking, this is also why actually it's probably good that you accepted the invitation now, mate. If it had been the last few months, it'd have just been really awkward, like, well, who is on the team and what's going on? Now, here's the good news. You're actually getting some banger players. Like, if people haven't seen, the team obviously got in Zeta, who was one of the best Cloud9 players, who was a fantastic player. Obviously, the Korean CSGO player once upon a time. You just got to notice Munchkin, who if people don't know from Overwatch, he actually is a player I thought had a very tragic career because early on in Overwatch, in the Overwatch League, he was actually a very good player, mate. He was a very skilled tracer player, really nice mechanics. He just went to the wrong teams and he sort of got used the wrong way, and gradually I believe he actually even retired from the game because he didn't like the game anymore. That he just was burned out on it. So these are some pretty good pieces to potentially build a squad with, and obviously it's been intimated. I know initially when they saw the Zeta announcement and this one, people thought, does that mean it's going all Korean because it's T1? Give us some thoughts on this new squad, like what's going on. Is this the lineup almost set now, or is this what we should expect to see going forwards?
Yeah, like obviously, like there's some things that I can't talk about when it comes to certain things because things are unannounced or things are private or whatnot. I think right now, like obviously we're staying in North America. I think it would be really cool to live in Seoul or something, like living South Korea. I think it would be cool, but I'm happy where I am, and we're playing in North America. And yeah, I mean, we got these players and Autumn, the coach, as well, is another important piece to talk about from Cloud9. So I think this is another important piece because it's like the vision. I think there's going to be a lot of changes for how we are going to be seen in the next whatever we play next, in terms of like style and everything in the next iteration of the T1 roster versus what we did in the last few months, which was not very successful. I think we've learned a lot from the mistakes that we've done in terms of like how practice was structured and how much like was on the weight of like players' shoulders, maybe in terms of just like thinking too much. I think that was like the ultimate thing is like players thinking too much in why we weren't successful. But now we have Autumn, who is going to be looking at like comps, like not specifically, but he's going to be very vocal about like what comps, for example, we should be looking at. He has backgrounds in different games, for example, and different scenes. So he's going to be very assertive in terms of like how he sees the game, but he's also going to share that with me. Like we're not going to be overstepping each other in a lot of ways. So a lot of how I see the game and view IGLing and all that stuff is going to remain constant. And we just have a couple of different players that are going to come and help us kind of like achieve that goal. And if I say Munchkin go kill, he's gonna go kill. So he's my little pocket like Asuna, CNED, whatever people like to meme about. So yeah, I think we could do really good things with this roster. I think we have it's going to be interesting with people say language barrier. We have yet to run a practice, so I can't speak to that.
Sure.
But I've it's not the same when you play like in Europe and you play with like a Swedish player or a German player or something like that, or a UK player, because don't understand what the fuck they're saying half the time. But it's a little bit different. I think there's ways that you can kind of circumvent language barrier issues, and you can have like certain keywords, or you can when I listen to other pros playing in like, if they release like match comms or something like that, it's very hectic. There's a lot of like words being spoken, like you're repeating the comm like 8 times.
A lot of signal noise.
Bro,
yeah,
it's like, what's going on? It's like, say something like once and clearly. Yes. Trim the fat. You don't have to use like 10 words to say something that takes 3 words. Use tone and like and volume to stress like, this is important info. Like he's flanking you. Like make sure you say that instead of like. It's like, wait, what's this guy saying? So you can definitely circumvent a lot of like the language barrier issues if you do things right. So I'm confident that with the players that we're getting, and when we start getting into practice and we start talking about like how we want to approach maps and the different comps that we're going to run and everything, I feel confident that we're going to be is actually successful instead of like hope to be successful.
Was the decision to bring in the Korean players and the Korean coach because T1, being a Korean organization, wanted to have that be part of their team, or was it like they wanted specifically one of those 3 people on the org and therefore wanted to kind of build around them a little bit?
You have an alarm going off in the background?
That's just a fire engine going past. Don't worry about that.
Oh, okay. I'm like,
I'll go in a second.
Yeah. So, I don't know like 100% of the specifics, and like this is from what I understand or what I just believed it to be the case. So I know that Autumn and C9, and also Zeta and C9 were like, okay, this whatever is not working out. There's potential to come to T1. T1, we haven't been successful this last, since I've been on the team, which was about 7 months, but the last 5 months of VCT. Our previous coach, Denis, he was like in full control of the roster for like I think over a year. So he's had like this iteration of the roster to kind of like make it happen, but also previous iteration, even as far back as like they had like Days, Automatic, Saya player, like they had a bunch of these players on the team. I think he was even on the team when like AZK and Brax were on the team. So you had a coach that, hadn't had the, results that an org would want. The org's looking to make changes. These other coaches and players are trying to come into the team. You have like a mixture of all these things, and you have, our GM's Korean, and he's obviously not happy with the results of the things, but he also has like a vision of certain things, and he's been managing the League of Legends team, and they run things a certain way, and he's been talking to different coaches, and they all share similar sentiment of like, yeah, I don't know why people do things like that or this, like it, this is how we've been successful doing it in our games, and you should look to do it like that. And so a lot of the pieces just came together between a variety of factors about like T1's lack of results, T1 management and League of Legends being like Korean and wanting to come, Korean players wanting to play with T1 because of that, and having like really smart coaches and skillful players wanting to come over. So all of these things like combined were just like a concoction that ended up resulting in our current roster. Yeah.
Sure. By the way, I will say one mad upside I hope you get from having these Korean players is, even if initially it makes it trickier to communicate, they're some of the only players you can usually rely on to put in fucking mad hours practicing the game themselves and make sure their skills at the top level. You don't have to ask this guy to play his role and learn the new agent, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that's like one of my major gripes with North American work ethic and stuff like that is like, I've had a lot of stuff going on in my life for the last like at least year and a half, where it's been hard for me to do put in the amount of time in that I would normally put in if it was Counter-Strike, for example. And when I do have the time, like, and I'm able to go hard, I go hard. But even with like all like the obstacles that I've had and all the different things that have been going on in my life, I've still put in more time in certain things than other, whether it be like ex-teammates or even like I know of other people in other teams, and they just don't know what hard work is or how to put in hard work. And I think part of that's because they've never like worked a job when they're 16, yes. 17, 18, just like worked part-time, even worked retail or in a factory or in a grocery store. I worked as a soccer referee. I worked in a meat packaging factory. I worked in IT for a year in an office setting. So like, I have different work experience, and I understand like how to do certain things or when you're supposed to do them on your own. And I think that's not something that a lot of North American players have learned. I think it's a culture thing, and you especially see it when I'm playing ranked and I'm streaming, and these ranked players like no calming, there's insta-lock of duelists, and they don't talk at all, and they just run around and like, just a game, dude, just have fun. Why are you so salty? Like whatever. And then the Twitch chat's like defending them, giving them excuses like, oh, they're not paid to play. Oh, this guy's got a real job and plays real sports. Or it's like, bro, like you're just giving excuses for us like being complacent and just like not deserving of anything. And then you have Korean players coming in and coaches, and sure, they're putting in the time and they know how to work hard. And if you don't match your the work ethic with them, they're just going to be like, all right, I'm coming in here and I'm stealing your entire continent. Like, what's up?
Absolutely. By the way, I would be remiss, because one thing I thought we could do with you that's quite cool compared to some of the other guests we had is some of the players who are in Valorant now but not on your team were under you when you were the IGL in CSGO. And I want to ask about some of these guys because they're pretty notable players if people don't know. So the first one, actually, I'm going to start with the least famous of them in CSGO, which has got to be Leaf. Because if people don't know, that's even to this day, the most famous thing Leaf is famous for is having Fallen set the fucking Brazilian hordes on him. That's it. Like, he actually didn't get a chance. There was no lands, obviously, during your era. Like, you didn't have a chance to show you had skills. In fact, because of that, people, I'm sure, in CSGO even wonder, did he cheat? Even though, by the way, these clips weren't even vague. They weren't even as bad as the old Flusher ones, for fuck's sake. They were the most mild clips I've ever seen. In reality, it was who he killed, not what he did. So, obviously, in Valorant, dude, when I first came over, there's one of the first things I heard that was like having a bucket of water thrown in my face. People were like, he might be the best North American player. I was like, what the fuck? I thought that you all said it was like tens of fucking Sinatra. These are the gods of the game. Like, really? Leaf's the best. So give me some thoughts on little Leaf and how he's developed in Cloud9. What do you think of him?
I think he's like a really like talented instinctual player. And I think one of the things that people in the just general community do is they attribute certain things to certain players. So like, Leaf was on a good trajectory before, I played with him. And it's stupid that people in the community will attribute like this player was under that player, therefore that player deserves like, you know, the IGL deserves all like the respect and everything, and this player wouldn't have made it without that IGL and stuff like that. I think Leaf was on a good trajectory when I played with him, and you know, it wasn't just me on the team. There's like Vanity was on the team. We had MCE as the coach. Like there was a lot of like different types of people like trying to hone him in and everything like that. But he was like a 16-year-old in like a 30-year-old's body type of stuff, or sorry, a 30-year-old in a 16-year-old's body type of thing. So he was like way more like mature, and he talked about the game, and he worked, and he's like no life the game basically. He just played all the time, but he was very talented, and he was a very instinctive player. He just knew like what to do and just played with confidence basically. So going from, you know, the short time that I played with him in CS to Valorant, like he was just able to like unlock himself in a certain way moving to Valorant because, you know, the agent dynamic, and he got a little bit older, and I don't really know specifically like the daily like work ethic and stuff of him right now, because it could have changed massively in the, you know, two years since I last played with him.
Sure. Okay, one of them you already mentioned.
Sorry, that was anticlimactic. Sorry.
That was good. It was all right. It just ended on a little sort of soft note at the end. Right? Yeah. The other one, I obviously want to know about Vanity, because the interesting thing is he also transitioned to be IGL just after you basically left in CSGO, and now that's what he does obviously himself in Cloud9. So what do you think of Vanity? Like, was he someone, for example, when you played with him, was it obvious this guy's going to be an IGL, is what he's going to do? I think he said he'd even done it earlier in his career, right?
Yeah, so he was IGL for E United. Around the same time I was on Ghost, for example, there was a famous clip of me at Pro League, you know, where's the shit talk now, you?
Okay.
You know, okay. So
that was who you were talking to? Okay, fair enough.
I was talking to him because we were playing.
It's pretty wild you went on the same team later then, yeah.
Yeah, and he was, I mean, that's the thing. Like when we're talking about like banter and stuff, like this is like actual banter. It's like you're talking shit to your opponents, but you're not like actually like, you don't hate them necessarily. I mean, sometimes you do, but you know, and oftentimes you're just like you're shit talking because that's part of the sport. So yeah, like I said that to him. They were shit talking us the whole game, but he was an in-game leader before I played with him, and we brought him onto the team knowing that I would be the in-game leader. And I said to him, for you to join this team, there's only one thing I need for you to do. It's to unbind quick switch. Because this guy, he'd be running up mid on Inferno, just switching between rifle knife, just like running up in the open and just getting caught with his knife out all the time. Like, dude, you gotta just unbind.
That's the worst.
If you're joining this team, you're unbinding that. He made that change. He was playing a lot better. He died with his knife out less often, everything like that.
Okay.
So I think that was it was good, and he was very vocal on the team when it came to things like we're implementing new strategies, or we're playing a game and we need like a mid-round decision, or we need a decision like a suggestion at the start of the round. Like these guys aren't even playing upper on nuke. Like let's do door rush or something like that. Or they're never playing mini. Like we just do door rush on them, and then you'd have those types of suggestions. So he worked pretty hard. He's always like on the computer. He's always like keeping up with like talk shows or podcasts. I'm pretty sure he kept up with like podcasts and stuff like that. But he would watch like all the matches. He would talk to other like his friend group about all the matches that are going on, and like pay attention to like all the big tournaments and everything like that. So he was really like paying attention to what's going on so that he could do IGL type of stuff. I mean his only thing is what's it called? Just like have you ever seen the types of players like I remember playing against Daps, and it's like you beat them a few times and then they just like tilt, like force spy and rush.
Yeah. Just basically they just give up mentally and break.
Kind of like that. When he's getting tilted, I think he like rushes things both individually and then like maybe as an in-game leader as an in-game leader as well. Instead of like being like, okay, like let's slow down and like let's think about stuff. I think he does the opposite.
Are you good at sort of being restrained in that sense? Because obviously you're on camera personality. It's more like that you're emotional, you would react. But in the game as an IGL, are you good at sort of disciplining yourself when you know you need to like that?
Oh yeah. Like if you ask my ex-teammates from like the last, I don't know, from Chaos, 100 Thieves or T1, like I don't think any of them would say that I was ever just like raging or anything like that, or even remotely close to how I am on stream. I think that's just like because people only watch my stream, or people talk to the teammates that I'm not on good terms with that might just like per some word with a P, just to make it seem like I am the bad person, and because
Dude, we should talk about that, because there's one angle I did. That's another thing I did think about when I saw 100 Thieves, like he's leaving or removed, and it was really vague, like what it was. Here's the first thing I also thought about, which is this is another area you're a little bit like an old school IGL mate. Is in the modern day, you have to understand, even in CSGO, there are some players that are like the big superstar names, and they're on too much money, their stats are too good, and they've got too big a name in the community. And you almost can't in the modern day, I'm telling you, with some of these guys, you can't discipline them. You almost have to talk to them like you're equals. It's like, can you please, sir, could you possibly?
Yeah.
Whereas I know you're more from the vibe of sort of like, look, if I've got a problem with you, mate, I'm just going to fucking tell you straight up. There's not going to be any like email politely. Let's just have it out. Let's have it out right now. Some people aren't going to take that the right way, right?
So I could tell you that there have been experiences on teams in CS where I stopped doing that more. Whatever you described, I stopped doing it because people did not react to it well at all. And like for context, when I started playing competitively in 2008, there were no coaches, there was no salaries. Like if you got sponsored by a team or an org or something, they would give you like free jerseys and like $500 for the entire team to, share a hotel room for a week or something like that. Like you would win mouse pads at tournaments. Like there wasn't what there is today in the current esports climate. There wasn't that. So when people got together to make teams and you climb to, ESEA Invite and SIVO Professional and stuff like that, and you go to your like BYOC lands where you drive 6 hours and hunk over your big CRT monitors and everything, you did this because you were serious about this stuff. And you had 5 players on the team that were all serious about it. And if someone was fucking up or not picking up their slack or not carrying their weight or something, you would, as individuals, you would talk to them about it. And it's the same thing in the server. If people are not doing their job or not paying attention, or they're not like calming or something, you say like, bro, like, why aren't you talking? That's the era that I came from, and I've toned it down a lot since then. It's been like literally over 10 years since then. And when I noticed in CSGO, when I was playing with, when I was unbanned and I was playing with like Torqued and then Ghost and then like the first iteration of Chaos, like I even more so like I've toned it way down because some people just aren't used to that and can't handle that at all. So I'm like, I
found it makes some people in the modern day, some of it feels like they clam up if you do that. Like they're just not even going to talk to you at all. Like you might think they're taking it in, but actually, if anything, they're sort of like low key hating you and just fucking just keep you bundled up, right?
There's so people will say like you have to know who you're talking to, and it's like this person can take it and that person can't. But I think I agree with that, but I feel like in some cases it's not even that. It's that. I don't know. It comes back to North American culture when it comes to like work ethic. It also comes back to ego. People can't be told that they're not doing something right or they're wrong or anything like that because it physically and mentally and everything hurts them. It hurts their ego. It hurts their pride. It hurts like everything. They can't hear this. They can't be told this. So they get really defensive and they get passive aggressive or shit talk you or blow up or anything. And then it's just like, it's not a good situation for anyone involved. So it's like better to overtune it and like drop the tone like way more and be like, all right, I'm going to give you way more freedom and space and everything. And not even like, I'm going to pick and choose like what I'm going to say because I need to decide, is this point that I'm going to bring up a hill I'm ready to die on? Yes or no? And if it's a no, then it's like, I'm going to let this slide. I'm going to let that slide. So in a sense, I might have even overtuned it a lot.
That's such like a bad sign anyway, because it's like you can't get feedback across to the people who need to hear the feedback, and you're just kind of like conceding that this is how it's going to be. Then you're kind of doomed.
Yeah. So this is where like I think it's very important for coaches. I think this is why like coaches in esports today need to be really in tune with what's going on the team. They need to have really clear communication with the organization's manager and like GM as well, and just say like exactly what's going on. There needs to be like constant, everything needs to be in the know. Everything needs to be out in the open. There can't be like these backdoor things. There can't be like this broken telephone, like, oh, this happened in practice today. And it's like one person's telling the story. Record all the practices. Like you should be recording it so you can look back at it anyways. But like the manager or the GM should be like either watching like a live stream of the practice, like you're streaming Discord or a YouTube live stream or something like that, or they should be like physically present in the practice to hear, maybe not all, 4 or 5 scrims in a day, but like, 1 or 2 of them. Hey, I'm just going to listen in on practice and see how the day's going. Like, you need to be in tune with this, because when it comes at the end of the day to come and say like, all right, we're losing our matches, and like, you're not on, you didn't do your VOD review, you didn't bring any suggestions to practice, you were like not commenting for like 3 days in a row. Like, where's the accountability here? And I think that's like one of the things that has been a transition from like the old school, I guess, like how it was just 5 players and everyone was just like, everyone held each other accountable. So you started getting like paid and contracts, and orgs are coming along, and then people can't hold each other accountable, and there's like animosity, and like, you're getting paid more than me, so I don't like you, and all this like petty bullshit is happening. You need to have that authority figure that's impartial, but also is present and isn't just hearing one person's side of the story. Oh, the star player said this and he's crying to you. Oh, I'm going to believe that. And I'm going to come in heavy-handed. I'm not even going to listen to the other side. I'm not going to even come in and like try to diffuse and disarm the situation. Be like, yo, like, can we talk about what's going on? Let's put everything on the table right now. Say everything you have to say right now. If you have a problem, say it right now. If you don't say it right now, then you cannot bring it up later as like a reason why, something, whatever's not working. You have to lay it out right now. And if you don't, you forever hold your peace type of thing, like you're getting married. You need to have people that are, have the finger on the pulse. And I don't think that necessarily exists across all orgs. And I think that's why sometimes you still hear like these stories from time to time.
Here's a question, and this is, I guess, kind of a big question. That I have my own thoughts about, but I'm curious your perspective. So yeah, you're describing that, sometimes you have these situations where, especially if you've got like a star player who is sort of, I guess, used to being the one who's always talked about and whatever, and people who are salty about maybe not like earning as much money as the next guy or whatever, and therefore they get defensive, egotistical, and in a sense kind of sabotage the team by not taking on the feedback. It's funny to me because you kind of attribute some of that to, this North American work ethic, so to speak. But North America is one of the places in the world that has some of the most, I suppose, major like sports culture, where you also have young men particularly who go in through like, let's say, college athletics. They become professionals at 18, 19, 20, similar ages to when we see these people come into esports. Yet, and I'm sure those people do exist in the sports culture, but not to the same extent. These are professional teams operating at, yes, much higher kind of budgets and things like that. But it is still the equivalent in the two, take, arbitrary sport A and then arbitrary esport A. They're still operating at the same equivalent level in terms of how elite they are in their own ecosystems.
Yeah, but it's not mainstream enough.
Is that what you think? I was going to say, what do you think lends itself to the fact that there is that disparity?
So I guess like primarily 2 things. One, the lifetime of esports is relatively short compared to, traditional sports like NBA, NFL, NHL and baseball, whatever.
MLB.
Whatever. Thank you. All of these things have been around for like 100 years or so. So you have these players that have been pros that have become coaches and mentors, and you have people that are getting scouted when they're in high school into colleges and everything like that. You have this system where people are kind of like, lack of a better word, groomed to be like professional, not esports athlete, professional athletes. Like people are serious about it from a very young age. The parents are serious about it from a very young age. Like these kids, when they're still like, teens and preteens, they're like playing the highest level they can play at. And you can't do that if you're just fucking about. You need to put the time in, run the drills. You need to, be physically in shape. You need to do everything that's required. And then when you get to like high school level and college level, you need to be like watching like all of this footage of like these other games and your opponents and everything like that. And if you're not doing that, then you're not going to make the cut. And then when it comes to esports, like, what does it take to be an esport athlete? You have free time and you spend, 20 hours a day playing ranked. Like, that's literally what it is to get the mechanical skill. You just put in raw time with zero like purpose or like you're not doing it with like a specific result or anything in mind. You're just going in and you're just like, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to play and play and play. And then you're mechanically really good. People scout you out and like, oh, this person could be really good. We can mold them. We can teach them how to like play the game instead of like this one-dimensional way. We can teach them how to play like how to speed up and slow down, and we can teach them how to communicate, and we can teach them how to do VOD review, and we can teach them how to bring ideas to practice, and we can teach them how to do interpersonal teamwork communication skills, and how to communicate with managers, and how to communicate with their teammates about, they're frustrated with something, or how to communicate in game. All of these things you think you can teach this kid, but it's different because they have no real life experience in a lot of cases, because they've potentially not worked a job outside of getting a contract from an esport team. They potentially haven't played traditional sports where they know where they like. I played sports as a kid growing up, and I was a soccer referee football referee when I was growing up. So I was yelled at by people much older than me, people that are very intimidating physically, people that were much bigger than me, by my coaches, by parents if I was doing like a house league game or something, by players if I was doing like an under 35 men's league, for example. I've done like linesman for the rep league. It's like the highest league that you can be outside of like competing on like a whatever national level. Like I've done these games. These guys don't fuck around. If you screw up, if you're not doing your job, you don't have a job. And I feel like when you get to esports, there's so much like luxury and everything's so lackadaisical and just like, it's just like whatever. Like if you didn't do that, it's okay, dude. It's fine, dude. Like you don't need to do that. Like who is holding who accountable? And I think that's where the difference is. It's not mainstream enough. In the sense that, it's okay. It's not old enough that you don't have like this mentorship. You don't have like people like building up to this thing, but it's also not mainstream enough that you don't have like people scouting kids out in high school to be on like a collegiate team or something like that. It's not mainstream enough that the parents like aren't fully supporting play. Like I never got the support as a kid when I was going into esports. Esports had no money. Why would I do that? Like that's not a thing that you can do. But even then, it's like it's not mainstream enough. It's not, the pay is not super lucrative compared to, if you make the NFL, you're, set for life if you play like one season or something like that. Esports, if you stop playing, you got to find yourself a real job, or not a real job, but another job, or you have to like go back to school, uni, college, whatever. So I think, and then there's also the, it's not mainstream enough in the sense that it's still one of those things where the actual boomers, not the esport boomers, are like, what are you doing? Esports? Like, what's that? You play video games? People pay you? Like, how do people pay you? What does that mean? Yes. Like, people just don't know about it. And it's, to them, it just perplexes them. And like, my parents understand it now, but it took several years to explain like what I do. And when I was banned, like, okay, I'm streaming now. What's streaming? It's like, oh, I talk to people that, I just put my camera on, I'm playing games, and I'm talking to people that are watching my live video feed. Like, oh, who pays you for that? It's like, you have to explain all these little things because it's not mainstream enough. So yeah, you have all these kids coming in, and they're just by accident falling into esports and by accident falling onto pro teams, and they have no experiences and no qualifications or anything, and they have to be taught everything, and then they just get overloaded, and then most of them can't make the cut because there's just too much, like it's sensory overload for them.
What were your thoughts on that then, Gio? I've got a few, but let's get yours since you teased.
Yeah, so I mean, I basically agree with everything that you said, but I think one thing that I would add to it is I think purely by nature of how video games work is the ecosystem through which you are raised, let's say, or not even ecosystem, but the way it works through which you are raised when you are growing and getting better and just playing video games in your spare time or whatever it is, it rewards individual success above your teammates, right? It's like you still want to be better than the people on your team.
You want to carry the game.
Yeah, exactly. So I know that, in terms of various video games, whatever it is they have implemented, means that yes, in theory, it should be the team's win that is the ultimate thing. Because of things like individual stats, people are conditioned to care mostly about their own individual performance. So I think that everything you described, while I agree with it all, it's a very like macro look at the ecosystem, right? But it's also like kids who come into esports and they're relatively young and whatever, they are coming in through having spent years and years and years essentially being told, you specifically as an individual have to be better than the people who are supposedly your allies. And I think that having that kind of environment where you are now supposed to be, you're expected to be a professional, you're expected to work as a team, and it's about whether the team wins or loses. How do you transition from that kind of mindset that you've been trained to have, where it's actually about you, into, no, it's not about you, it's about like, the holistic team instead? And I think that is quite dangerous.
The you plural.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's quite dangerous in the sense of like being able to really, encourage like the right mindset into these, young players who want to come in. Whereas like, and that's why actually I always find it interesting that a lot of young players who do seem to have the right mindset usually have some background in sports or even things like, I don't know, whether they've been involved in like a student government or something like that, something where it is all about like a group. But it's like if you were a kid and you're playing in like whatever your little like kids league of insert sport here is, if all you care about is your coach is gonna fucking whoop your ass, even if you're 7.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? It's like that is gonna be like, I don't want to say smacked out of you as if it's actually gonna be smacked out of you, but you know what I mean, right? And it's like there's no one or nothing to prevent that from happening for just people who are like, I'm 12, I just bought this, 13, because you have to be legally 13 to buy games. I'm 13, I just bought this video game, I'm going to play it for the next 5 years, and then I'm going to go pro. In those 5 years, who is holding you accountable to that? No one.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay, so I guess like one of the first initial thoughts I had when you were describing all this stuff is that so there's two things. One, the community thinks that I'm like a toxic rager, like who would want to play with me and all this stuff. And like, why don't I set the community straight about it? And two, because it leads into this, I know that as an experienced IGL, I know that when it comes down to the orgs that are talking to me and the GMs that are making the decisions to pick up a new player in an IGL, I know that they are talking to other people that actually play on a high level that have played with me before, and they're asking them for their opinions. They're not asking the community for their opinions.
They're not going by the Reddit narrative or whatever.
Yeah, they're not going by Reddit. They're not going by Twitter. They're going by, is this guy actually like capable of this stuff? Yes or no? And then, the people that have played with me are like, yeah. And so I know that when it comes to this type of stuff, I'm relatively safe. I can find another team because I'm an IGL and we're in such short supply. And when we're going and we're trialing people for, even the iteration of T1 that wasn't successful, 5 months ago, we're looking at huge list of duelist players and then a little bit lower for flex and then like a couple of controller players. And then it's like, that's it, because people, they come on and it is about individual. It's about stats. It's about who has the highest ACS or stats or ADR or whatever. It's about who's the star player, and the star players are always going to be duelist players. So everyone just oversaturates duelist role because they want to get spotted. You're not going to get spotted if you're like a hardworking sentinel or controller player that puts in a lot of time and has good work ethic and has really good comms, really good setups and suggestions and stuff like that, and can secondary IGL. You're not going to get a shot like that because you're sitting there doing your job and you're setting up your star player and you're throwing your flashes and your darts and they're getting all the kills from your support util. And then they have their fucking like 400 ACS, 30 and 5 in the game. And you're sitting there at like, 10 and 10 or something. You did your job. You got your kills when they came to your site, and you guys are on eco round and you're, running around with a classic and you're getting killed. And that adds to the death tally. It's like, no one's going to look at you. And that's what people think in their heads. No one's going to look at you. And I can tell you that's not the case, that people need to look at other people like controllers and sentinel players and initiators, and that when it comes down to it, it's to me, it's like how everyone recently has been sent to university or colleges, and they're sent to do all these white collar jobs. And then what's going to happen is all these boomer electricians and plumbers and tradesmen are going to go and retire, and there's going to be a huge vacuum where there's nobody in those jobs. And then those people are going to be making big money. They already make good money. They already make good money, and they're already good jobs. But there's going to be such a shortage of them that it's just like, dude, you want a plumber to come in, you got to wait 2 weeks.
Yeah,
I think,
so this is how you get a gig then in Valorant. If you want to be a pro, do the non-sexy role, but be a plumber, as it were.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, they shut down like all trade schools in the UK in the 90s. So it's like, that's just waiting to happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, but it's a good point, because basically this is one of the things I always used to say. You know, back in the early days of CSGO, where it was just your team and Cloud9, and the whole thing was like all the scrims and shit and that. I used to always say half the problem was everyone's just trying to be fucking Forest. No one wants to be like Zipnix or the classic support. No one wants to be the support player and do all these shit roles. Like, that's not sexy, is it? But the problem is, as you're saying, that's how you get the gig. Because I'll give you a quick story. I remember this is the difference between real coaching and just looking at stats. I remember a long, long time ago, obviously it was when I was a boy, all the jokes. I was on a penny farthing riding up the hill to school through the snow, 6 feet, whatever, all the jokes. So anyway, when I once went to a football trial for the school team, right, as you can imagine, what they do is not everyone can play a striker, right, because every kid wants to be the striker. So what they do is they make a bunch of makeshift teams, and then they give you, like, a little bit of time each. So, they'll swap, right, now you play midfield, he plays striker. And I remember there was a kid who went to one of these trials, and he scored about like 6 goals. He was doing mega, right? But all he did, as you can imagine, is he just did like the sort of cynical way of being a striker. Like, he never ran back on defence. He just waited upfield. He waited every time there was a breakthrough, someone passed the ball forwards, and he scored an easy goal. Now, in his brain, he really thought, no joke, when he walked off, I'm in the team, aren't I? And it goes out saying he didn't get in the team. Because it didn't matter that he scored 6 goals.
Nothing.
What the coach was looking at for real was like, you can only do like sort of essentially a shitty version of your role, and you refuse to do anything else. Meanwhile, I've guarantee you, whoever he picked as the actual real striker probably like tried when he was in midfield, maybe even played defense at one point, passed the ball, didn't just take every selfish shot. Like, I actually feel like this is a real like mentality difference, if you want, because what it ties back into is what you were saying. Almost every real sport, you can't even get to the pro level without going through a million coaches from the time you're a little kid, when you'd never have an ego like that. Or if you did, as you say, by the way, forget just coaches. The other kids' parents aren't going to take you fucking having the POC 24/7 and never passing it. They're going to say, get this guy the fuck off the ice. Like, my kid has to get a go. Like, all these things socially are going to condition you. And then the other thing I would throw in is, I just looked it up now. Dude, if I actually think of the best, the most famous coaches in CSGO, they are all now roughly 35 years old. I just looked it up on Wikipedia, which means in their prime, by the way, they were about 30 or 31. That's like, you wouldn't even have retired as a pro in sports at that age. Like, the coach, like your coach, he's 50 years old. Yeah, exactly. They have even more life experience in the coaching game in the real sports, Yeah.
Yeah. It's also, I find it like, oh, sorry, I was just going to interrupt and say, like, you can always tell the players who are like that and have that kind of mindset, because there's always a very palpable level of insecurity. And like, even just an example that like I could relate to, in the sense, I'm not a pro player, I'm not playing at that level or anything, but it's like, if I go into a ranked game, there is always this thing that people say, and I remember there was this like graph or something about it, but it was like, the higher the elo you go, the less threatened by a woman playing well a lot of ranked players will be. And I always find that really like kind of funny and interesting, because in Valorant I'm total ass. And if I have like a game where, it's not every game, like I actually think in the grand scheme of things, I have not experienced a lot of like gender-based toxicity in games, but there have definitely been people here and there who like, they get so mad about stuff, and they're always going to pick on you for the thing that they think is your weakness. So in my case, that is because I'm a woman, but this same person could still get angry at the next guy on the team, but he would yell at him for something. But it's always like the people who like, oh, you know, they rushed in, they were the first to die, and then they're going to sit and tell you how shit you are. And it's like, in my case, what that will usually manifest as is like, you're a woman, you're going to be shit at the game. But it's like, it's so much insecurity from those people who want to be the star player because they want everybody to think that they are really, really good. And so when they then don't perform, they get defensive and they put that blame on everyone else and they project. And you see that a lot in, especially the lower elos in ranked, because I mean, the highest elo of anything I've ever played was in Overwatch, which was near like Grandmaster level. And people just didn't give a fuck. People were so nice because people aren't insecure as much there. And especially in a game like Overwatch where those roles are so set in stone. So it's kind of like, yeah, the guy who's playing like main support is probably going to be happy playing main support because like that's, you know,
he's
just
not forced off role it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, I always just, for me, it's like how insecure the person behaves is always the big giveaway.
Yes.
I have a question. Have you noticed an uptick in that since COVID lockdowns started happening? Of like that behavior?
Good question.
Like as in they go a bit more stir crazy or something.
It's just like, so just the timeline.
It's the tension thing too, right? Like
I mean, I think you're right because during COVID, I was mostly playing Rainbow Six, and Rainbow Six is by far and away the most toxic game that I've played. So that was like in the middle of COVID. So you're probably right. And then back when I was playing Overwatch was before COVID, and then Valorant has, you know, been sort of the tail end of that. But I would say Rainbow Six in the middle of COVID, definitely the worst, where people were just, they just try so hard to, I don't know, be that guy. I don't know how else to put it. You know what I mean?
I have a feeling that people were like attention starved when everyone was like locked down for COVID.
Yeah,
and, like
absolutely.
they just need to they need to act out in whatever way possible. What was the first part that we were talking about again? Before
we were talking about coaching before and like bringing up players and sort of the mentality of a lot of the like entitlement of players, etc.
And coaches being
and the star players and just like low elo and toxicity and stuff like that. I think that is an actual thing that it might be the I think this is an actual psychological phenomena where it happens in multiple different ways, where it could be like Dunning-Kruger in part, where it's like you think you don't know shit about the game, but you think you're a know-it-all, and you think everyone else is like bringing you down. And like the closer you get to like the higher ranks, you're like, oh, okay, like I know exactly where I am. I got a little bit to go still, but I'm like way beyond like those other things. Like I'm not. I
mean, every low elo person low key thinks they're secretly trapped there, and it's not real. And you know they're supposed to be in the top elos, but it's these people. That's sort of like the famous trend in it.
Yeah, so I think there is a lot of like psychological stuff going on when it comes to these types of players in these ranks, and when it comes to playing, like being the star player and having like this complete meltdown if they're not or whatever. I don't feel like I'm anywhere close to, you know, retiring and becoming a coach, and I don't think like it's, if you look at a traditional sport like an NBA player and you're like, you're 32. Are you thinking about retirement soon? It's like, what?
It's my prime. Yeah, exactly.
Like what?
Yeah.
This is when I collect the biggest bucks. Like what's going on here? It's like esports. I don't know. It's so weird. I feel like the only thing that could really be an impact on your esport career is, you know, if you have a kid. I think like that's the biggest thing that could happen. I think you can still do everything else that you want to. I think like if you're going to have a partner in life, I think they need to like be understanding of it, and they have to know what they're signing up for. And it might be, you know, harder to figure out like how to weed out that partner and get to like the right partner. But I think it's like definitely possible to do everything. But then when it comes to like, you know, you have to go take care of your kid and they're like crying in the back and stuff like that, and you want to actually spend real time with them, I think that's the only thing that's preventing a pro player from having like a long career into, you know, the late 30s or dare I say 40s. You know, White-Raw was pretty old in StarCraft at the time. He wasn't like the best player, but like he was, you know, still innovative and stuff like that.
Good hang. All right, another person I should ask about, actually, because as you mentioned, he was the coach in Chaos. At the time, I will say no one gave a flying fuck, because unfortunately, A, you were the IGL, and B, you came with the rep that it's Steel doing everything, so no one gave a fuck about MCE and CSGO, I can tell you. I myself had to go, he was in CSGO, fair enough. But I noticed he's getting mad props now with fucking Valorant Steel, because everyone's loving the guard. Everyone thinks they're the sort of the shit.
Well,
and he
they're
gets
about
a lot
to
of
not qualify for playoffs.
True, but he gets sort of the credit for the fucking fundamentals of the team. So what do you think of this guy then? What was he like to work with in CSGO?
I think really highly of him. In CS, it was really funny because, as I said, we had Vanity, but it wasn't just us two that were vocal on the team. Zeppa, Leaf, Janji, we were all everyone was really vocal about stuff. Everyone brought ideas to practice. Everyone had an idea of how to play. So MC was he had a lot of ideas, but he was basically trying to reel us in so that we wouldn't go all fucking crazy and trolling and joking around. He would get pissed when I'd do the P90 buys when we're only we're 15-11 up on nuke or something CT side, and I buy a P90. He'd get pissed at it and say stop trolling and stuff, just trying to hone us in so we wouldn't troll around too much. But I think he's always had a pretty good mind for the game. So I mean, people might not remember, but he was on that team that the SOAR Dignitas whatever issue when they made Pro League from whatever team. Do you remember that situation in NA Pro League?
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah, so I first played with MCE at a Fragadelphia event, and he was a player on the team. Actually, I might have met him before or after, I don't remember, but he understands the game. He has a very good understanding of the game, but he was just limited in mechanical skill, and I think when it came down to pressure situations, he wouldn't play that well. But he understands the game really well, the fundamental setups. He understands utility usage, a lot of the strategy stuff. He understands, and he also understands player limitations and stuff. So he's able to bring out all these players and rosters of people that really wouldn't go far without his system. They've become something. And where we see, we saw Grim on Liquid last year, for example, he came from that Triumph roster. And of all the people that were on Triumph at the time, Grim's the only person that's left. And, with a relative deal of success. Everyone else kind of went their own way and didn't really succeed out of it. So you could tell the same thing with the guard. The guard was a bunch of people that, a couple of people from Complexity, I think, that weren't doing well, and then some unknown Trent guy, and two other people that weren't really successful, and you put them all together, and you're yeah, what the fuck are these guys gonna do? And then suddenly they're doing really well. I think a large part of it is attributed to MCE because what he can do with the right players in the right system that actually buy into the system, that listen to him, and are able to kind of be the players that when you scout out players oh, this guy could be a huge talent, he has loads of potential. There's so many players that have loads of potential, but you need to be able to realize that potential. And I think the guard was able to do it in a certain way. I still think that there's time because it's a short honeymoon phase. They could have been doing really well, and there's time for them to kind of hit rock bottom and then see how do you guys recover from rock bottom type of thing. Do you rebound or does it just kill you? And I think that's when we're talking about players with age or players with experience. I think that's part of esports and part of your life as an esport player is that you need to go through these ebbs and flows. You need to have these hardships, and you need to learn from the hardships. And some people don't make it through those hardships, and other people do. And those hardships could make those people stronger. Sorry for the meme, but
it's all right.
Who originated that tweet? I think it was MSL. And I've just copy pasted that tweet.
They will come back stronger out of the year. Basically, if people don't know, there was an in-game leader in Counter-Strike who every time they bloody lost, spoiler, he wasn't in the best team, so it was every tournament, he would just do a tweet like that and be oh, sorry guys, we're going to come back stronger next time. But the joke was, it's fucking hell, mate. Were you just going to come back fucking hench as shit? You've lost a million times, you idiot. He took the meme too far, didn't he? Ran it into the ground till it meant nothing anymore.
I've been copy-pasting that tweet for 3 years at least. People are so pissed.
Okay. It works.
So anyways,
Yeah, here's the thing. We've only got like 10 minutes left, so I want to ask you this.
Okay.
Right, this is going to be a meme question / a real question about analysis, but I'm going to set it up like this. Right, this show is a dedicated Sentinels hate show, but it's not really.
Oh, is it?
A, it's just that A, what they haven't come on the show yet, and B, they've been losing the whole time, so it's going to sound like hate if you're a Sentinels fan, because we have to explain why they're not actually as good as you guys think, because they never bloody do anything at the moment. But the problem is, here's the thing, Gio, there's an extra spicy little layer that I just want to get an update on, because if people don't know, in CSGO, Steel and Shazam, not the best of friends, you know, some would even say maybe Shazam's a bit of an arsehole, and on occasion, to the right sort of person. I want to know, is there still any tension there in that regard? What do you think of Sentinels? The fact that, like, I mean, to me, they seem like the opposite of your type of a team. They look like a team that doesn't really seem like they give a fuck about IGL or coaching, and they're just trying to play the game.
It's hard to know for sure about like what they do in the game. It feels like, and from like all perspectives, it looks like they don't give enough of a shit. And you know, whether that be, you know, because they haven't had like the proper staff, like coaches or anything, maybe they couldn't find the right coach. You know, you got to play devil's advocate or something. I feel like they don't care as much because they have way too many hours logged on stream, and when they do have scrims, not everyone's awake for the scrims, so they have to cancel a lot. And this is just like, you know, from talking to other people, other pros that, you know, have games scheduled against them that are like, someone slept in again. So it's hard for me to say that they are trying as like giving as much of a fuck about, you know, the pro stuff as much as they could be. But that's their prerogative. Who cares? As for the Shazam thing, I stay in my lane. I'm
fucking hell. He's mellowed in his age now. He's mellowed in his age. Okay. What about this then, Steel? What if I spin it this way?
I'm not going for this petty public drama.
No, okay, fair enough.
I'm done.
I don't even know what any of it's like.
No, don't worry.
This is like the funny thing about like especially most of the guests we've had on this show is like, as soon as it gets into like references about like things that happen in CS, I just kind of sit there and I'm like, I'm so happy to be here because I have no fucking idea.
It's all good.
I'm like a ranked player.
I'm learning as, you know, the story is being told in front of me. So, you know.
Put it this way, it's like I said on one of the early episodes, like there's a lot of different things shocked me when I like started looking at more than just a Wikipedia for Valorant, right? So one of them, I've even said this straight up, I don't give a fuck. What's going to hurt his feelings? Oh, fucking hell, I have to get tissue, won't he? Kleenex sponsorship, right? When I heard that like Boasters, like the IGL, I was like, mate, he was at like fucking tier 2 CSGO lands in the UK, and no one would have ever said he'd make. So that was one shock. But one of the biggest shocks for real, Steel, was when I came into the game and started watching the NA stuff, and people were going, Shazam is like the best leader in the world, and I was like, he's a leader. That was like the fucking eyebrow raise from the century. Like, what? He's an IGL in this game, man. This game must be a very different game than I was familiar with CSGO.
Yeah, I'm not okay. So when it comes to Shazam as an IGL, I'm not sure how much he actually like IGLs the same way like most IGLs would. I think a lot of like the mid round stuff comes from, I would say, probably Dapper and possibly Sick. I think they have a lot of like, when it comes to in-game stuff, I think they have a lot of just like a big voice when it comes to that type of stuff. And when it comes to like IGL stuff, it's like, okay, what does an IGL do? I can speak for myself. And what I think an IGL is supposed to do is that it's not so much that you're in the game when you're calling all the shots and stuff. It's about what you do out of the game. It's about the prep. It's about coming with new ideas. It's about coming with different like comp change suggestions. It's about how are we going to structure a practice? Are we going to do VOD review as a team? Am I going to like assign homework to people and then have them go and like bring ideas or watch a game back and bring a couple of runs that we need to review because we had a bad loss? What can we do to fix this stuff? So an IGL has a lot of responsibilities outside of the game, and isn't just like limited to, oh, you go in the server and you just say like, let's do A default, let's rush B, let's go CNED A, go B. Like it's more than just that. And I don't know if it was that or if it was more of that like how we were talking before about the old school thing about how everyone's holding everyone accountable and you don't have the org or anything. And then it's just like on the individual people to kind of like show up and put the time in. And then you just have like one person that's just like oh, you're the guy that calls the start of the round, and then like everyone just has the input. I feel like they're more of that team. I could be completely wrong, but that's the vibe I get.
This video was kindly supported by Ahmed Hadjou, Matt Pugnatio, Rajcula, Kyle R, Pacy, Travis Goff, ochs, Animosity, ButtPounder420, Hades, Jensen Goh, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Thooorin, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and a special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to find out who upcoming guests are going to be? Maybe even suggest them on the topic for my content. Maybe you want to appear in one of those lengthy esports discussions with me, or ask me a question for my video AMA. Well, if these perks, or indeed any of the others available, intrigue you, then join the Screw Illuminati today. Put the money where your mouth is. Where? In the description box below and the Patreon link.